The Inca Empire, for example, when we talk about the fall of the Inca Empire, we have to talk about Francisco Pizarro, a sneaky little guy who really, did horrible things to the Incas, right? He took the Inca ruler Atahualpa hostage in 1532, and he also had a welcome by the Incas. They were not seen as enemies in the beginning, huh? The Spaniards had the advantage of having horses, steel, and gunpowder, and gave the advantage against the warriors who had stone edge weapons, different from the firearms. Spanish killed. Indigenous warriors focus on taking captives, like prisoners of war, so it's a different tactic. And the Spanish advantage were gunpowder from China, horses from Asia, and old world diseases that they brought from Europe. Atahualpa had an army of tens of thousands, and Pizarro only had 168 Spaniards. So how did he defeat the Incas? By, cheating, I guess, in some way. Pizarro drew the same tactic that Spanish applied to the Aztecs, the surprise slaughter of indigenous nobles within a very close range. He invited Atahualpa's followers in a close square, and hid cannons within that square. And when they were all gathered and they were clueless of what was going to happen, they attacked with the cannons and firearms in close range. And there was a mass massacre in the square, plaza, right? They charged with their horses, blades, shields, everything. I posted a video on YouTube for you to watch what it looked like kind of at the time. Not one Spaniard died that day because it was a surprise attack, remember? And Atahualpa was taken prisoner, killing thousands of men, and Atahualpa's people brought mountains of gold as a ransom to make sure that the leader survived, but Pizarro executed him anyways, and they took the gold too, okay? So they took the gold and they executed him. Sad, huh? So key indigenous allies really helped, like Tlaxcala and all rival Tenochtitlan sent thousands of warriors to help Cortés, which helped defeat the Aztec Empire. Unlike the Aztecs, the Incas had imposed a centralized power that broke up rivalries in city-states and resettled the populations. Both reigning emperors and their successors died suddenly. What is the luck, right? What are the odds for good luck for Pizarro? That this created a succession crisis. And there was a civil war going on. Atahualpa led one side and his brother Huáscar the other. So what Pizarro does, he plays both of them against each other and achieves victory for himself. Very smart. And as soon as the empires collapsed in Mexico and Peru, they began to ship stolen goods. Some were treasures of the indigenous royalty, but most took the form of something called encomienda. So what is encomienda? Encomienda is a system. The conquerors were rewarded with people. So indigenous people were entrusted, encomendados, right? Meaning the word encomienda, to each conqueror who had the responsibility of Christianizing them, saving their souls in exchange of free labor. So all these people who were living on those lands had to work for free, in exchange of being Christianized and being saved. Their souls being saved to go to heaven. Very interesting system, huh? And the conquerors who received encomiendas became much like the European nobles. So the new rich, right? From the poor rising to be rich. The indigenous farms accustomed to paying tribute to imperial masters, the situation was very familiar, so they went along with it. So all these people from sedentary societies where they had social stratification they were able to follow commands because they had people above them who used to do that. Okay, so I guess in a way, the Spaniards and the Spaniards had an easier time controlling the people because they already had that system of stratification in the society. During the 1500s, epidemics reduced the native population a lot in the Caribbean and Brazil, that you will see later, and it did not disappear in Peru and Mexico as it occurred in the Caribbean and Brazil. The Spanish created encomiendas out of existing communities with their own indigenous nobles. So they would have encomiendas and they would have caciques, who are the leaders who are controlling the encomienda. And Mexico became New Spain. So I don't know if you heard about the legend or reality, I don't know, of La Malinche. This is a woman whose indigenous name was Malinche, and she was one of the 20 female slaves given to Cortés, okay, when he came to Mexico. She spoke Mayan and Nahuatl and learned Spanish in months. She was very smart with languages. She was only 16 years old and became Cortés's translator and also his lover. They actually have a child together, and was instrumental in the capture of Moctezuma, okay, because she was one of them, right? And she's kind of like seen as the traitor, who, gave up her people by helping Cortés, right? Which is kind of sad. The Aztec princess Teichich was the daughter of Moctezuma. She was later baptized as Isabel Moctezuma, and she was a model of Catholic devotion because she was an Aztec princess who converted into Catholicism and became a model, right? And she died at the age of 40. As the Aztec and Inca nobility declined, the number of Spanish women increased and fewer men married indigenous women, but continued fathering mestizo children. So mestizos are half Spanish and half indigenous. And those mestizos were considered second-class citizens. You will see later on there will be a caste system in the society. And who's at the top? European, right? And everybody else starts coming under that, first class. So they're second-class citizens. Churches were built on sites sacred to indigenous deities, like the Aztec Great Temple. As you can see, you see the Great Cathedral being built in the same site. And the fully sedentary people of central Mexico and Peru survived the encounter better than the semi-sedentary people like the Tupi in Brazil. By the end of the 1500s, the basic contours of ethnicity was established. You have the American, the European, and the African genes in the cultures began mixing and creating diversity. And this diversity would create a caste system later on because the Europeans are afraid of other races taking over the power. And the Brazil and the Caribbean, European, and Africans, the indigenous population was wiped out. So it's kind of interesting. Brazil and the Caribbean is mainly European and African population, or the mix of the two, because the indigenous were wiped out. A lot of them were mixed into other places, right? Other races. So European and African are dominant in these areas. In Mexico and Peru, Nahuatl and Quechua speaking societies survived to be gradually transformed. And there's this friar, Bartolomé de las Casas, who denounced the abuses that were happening by the Spaniards in the Spanish Americas. And he wrote something called A Brief Account of the Destruction of the Indies, describing the cruelty that was done against the indigenous people in America. And this actually helped to create the new laws in the Indies in 1542 for the good treatment and preservation of the Indians, limiting and later ending the encomiendas altogether. In 1552 that was written, and this was taken to the king and queen, and these new laws were created to protect the Indians. But I wouldn't say that that resolved the problem of what was happening in the Americas, as you will see later on. But this writing that he had inspired many churchmen and churchwomen in Latin America even 400 years later. That's it for chapter 2, you guys. See you in chapter 3.